Religion is basically a mapping of looking at the world, and that mapping, anything that you do, will have psychoneurological consequences. So, for example, if you believe that the universe is guarding your back, there's no such thing. The universe is very interested in expanding. It's not going to come back and get you a new car. But if you believe that, that sense of connection and that sense of belongingness will help you immunologically for the wrong reasons. So religion, if you believe in God, like Pascal, it said, they call it Pascal's wager, said, whether God exists or not is not important. It's, if you believe in God, you're going to do better.
You know, when I reached out, it's because I'm reading this book, right? And now I'm like, oh my God, what was I even thinking about? But it's this really amazing book about the church, actually. And he's talking about, like, it's a neurotheologist. So he's talking about neurology and theology. And I've never heard that put together. I was stunned at the whole thing. Like, this is brilliant, but I love it.
It is, yeah.
So much joy. Talks about joy being created in the right hemisphere and with gratitude. I was really fascinated by it. It made me think of you and like thinking, I would love to hear.
Yeah, it's very similar. Who's the author?
The Other Half of Church. And it's Jim Wilder and Michael Hendricks.
Jim Wilder, Michael Hendricks.
Christian Community, Brain Science, and Overcoming Spiritual Stagnation. And I'm only probably 60% through it. So it's definitely written like for the Christian church. And there's like right there, open up the benefits of joy. And I've discovered personally, Mario, that joy is a thing I have to learn.
Yeah,
there's a big lesson for me, like around joy.
Yeah, and when they say children are joyful, they're not. They're happy or unhappy. Joy is a very complex emotion. It's a set of emotions.
It is. I had no idea. And the way they're explaining it in terms of how it's a supra emotion and is stacked on other things. And it made total sense in terms of how it's all about relational. And it's kind of blowing my mind. So anyway, I just thought, let's talk to you, a neuropsychologist, about really anything you want to talk about. But if there's anything about, the brain and joy, gratitude.
Yeah.
So what do you want to talk about? Because we've got a lot going on. I know you got some new stuff. And
well, I'm doing this really, really powerful 7-week course with Shift Network. It's on longevity, the 4 factors that I found of centenarians of longevity, and joy is one of the components, and how it affects you psychoneurologically and why. And I got it from centenarians, people that I studied who were over 120 years, about over 150 centenarians. So it's really very empirical, but really good. And it's going really well. I had the first session Monday, so it's 7 Mondays, and it's really, really good. It's got a lot of not only what I'm doing, but videos that they produce, and it's just a very professional organization.
So are you doing it live with a group of people, and then people can buy it afterwards?
That's right. The live, they can ask questions, and then the others they can buy it. But the good thing is they have outbreak books. Groups, and then in those groups, I give them questions to ask each other and to go over to create a community, a subculture that supports the things that they're learning. So a lot of times you lose that if you don't have the people that support what you're trying to learn.
All right. So at the time we're recording, so you're 1 week in, can people join now, late?
Yes, anytime. They can go to my website, biocognitive.com, and they're on services. It's there. It's the Shift Network, and they can go and they can join. We had 1 already, but that's recorded. So if you start with 2, you can go back to 1. And there's also a community on Facebook. They have a support community where I put videos and information just for them. So we want to create that concept, because we know that, especially Ellen Langer has done a lot of this work at Harvard, and so have I. She's a colleague, and she's found, and I have independently also, that whatever you learn, whatever therapeutic gains you have, the culture will try to bring you back to where you came from. So if you don't have a culture, a subculture of wellness that supports what you're doing, within a few weeks, you lose much of the game. So we're assuring that this is not going to happen by creating these kinds of things that we're doing, that people can go through.
Right. So what I'm understanding, like, yeah, you're creating a small subculture. And so when people leave an experiential weekend or a seminar and they go home to that culture, they typically lose everything.
That's right.
Saying. They don't create that. Yeah.
That's
gotcha.
right. Yeah.
That community. Okay. Yeah. That's why I reached out again, that book, and it's all about using neurology and theology, but it's all about creating community. And that's what it really is. And it's saying basically these organizations have become very left hemisphere and very more structured on thinking and logics and teaching, instead of actually right hemisphere connecting and relational and emotional, which I thought was a fascinating, concept, just in terms of, I never looked at it that way. Right? Like organizations or community, like a church, or even I run group courses. I'm leaving in 3 weeks to lead a retreat in South Africa. Like, I will be creating a community and a subculture. We already have Zooms and a WhatsApp communication, and it's changed my whole shifting thinking. Because like you, I deal with brain things, right? I'm like, I have to think the left hand. I'm proud of my thinking self. And I'm like, right, but you can't forget the other part of you, and you can't not be bringing it all together. And
it's because the brain was set to converge, not to be separate, and we separate with logic. But even with religion, I mean, religion is basically a mapping of looking at the world, and that mapping, anything that you do, will have psychoneuroimmunological consequences. So, for example, if you believe that the universe is guarding your back, there's no such thing. The universe is very interested in expanding. It's not going to come back and get you a new car. But if you believe that, that sense of connection and that sense of belongingness will help you immunologically for the wrong reasons. So religion, if you believe in God, like Pascal, it said, they call it Pascal's wager, said, whether God exists or not is not important. It's, if you believe in God, you're going to do better. And it's because of that concept that if you, the brain will support your belief, not what's going out there. Yeah. If you believe that people love you, you'll have all kinds of immunological enhancements. If you don't believe that people love you, you could be a rock star and have millions of people love you, and you commit suicide, or you get depressed, or you do drugs. So it's really the belief system of the theater that you create what your biology responds to.
Perfect. Okay, so now people who have been eavesdropping in on our conversation might be like, I didn't actually introduce you yet. Who is this guy? Who's she talking to? So this is Mario Martinez, and so you are a psychologist, correct?
Neuropsychologist, yeah.
Clinical right? So yeah, so I'm going to tell, so he's a psychologist. People know what that is. Now, when we add neuro onto it, it's a little bit different. They might be like, well, why are we adding that? I also refer to you in my mind as a psychoneuroimmunologist.
Yes.
Right. Okay, great. So not everybody might know what that is. And you've talked about the immune system several times, and they might be like, who's this guy and why is he doing that? So why don't you explain what that is, who you are? His books are extraordinary, you guys. Say your website again. We'll have everything in the show notes, but I love your books. They're a journey unto themselves. I like how some of them are very actionable, how you can do things and like self-healing tools. Plus you have, group courses people can do. And so you're a very unique type of psychologist, and you have a very unique niche. So tell people what you do.
Yes. My mentor was George Solomon, who created psychoneuroimmunology. At first, they call it psychoimmunology, then it became psychoneuro. But basically what he found is what people suspected, that the immune system, the nervous system, and the endocrine system respond to your emotions and to your thoughts. So thoughts and emotions can regulate immune, nervous, and endocrine system. So knowing that, then a lot of research has been going on, looking at what happens when a person, not just stress, because a lot of work on stress, and it's just not stress, but it's the inflammation, for example. Inflammatory kinds of problems. Shame can cause inflammation because the immune system had to learn to interpret the culture, just like the brain had to learn to interpret the culture. So if you go back 150,000 years, there was no language around maybe 40, 50,000 years, consciousness became something similar to what we have now. So before, you could smell a lion 300 feet away. Then language comes on, and somebody says, there's a lion 300 feet away. So the brain had to learn the code of language as it learned the code of senses. So language is now biosymbolic. So since it's biosymbolic, then the immune nervous and endocrine system have to understand the brain. So if I say, you're so wonderful, you're so great, and you look at me and we smile, there's oxytocin, a really good neurotransmitter, a neuropeptide that's great for heart enhancing and all that. But if I say, you're so dumb, you're so stupid, you're going to have inflammation molecules, interleukin 6 and tumor necrosis factor. So words are biosymbolic. You can't just say words don't mean anything. Words become a part of life. So that's part of what I do. And then I study centenarians, people who are over 100, and I wanted to see the ones who are healthy. And after many years, I found, and other researchers found, that it's only genetics is only 20%. That's the good news. The rest is what's called epigenetics, and I'll explain that. But also, it's just the cultural beliefs that you have are longevity enhancing or not.
Yeah, that's what I think was so interesting with you. I think you were the first person that I encountered that the idea of cultural beliefs were something so important in longevity, versus everybody wants to talk about, calorie restriction, fasting, things like, community, people, that's a big deal. But you brought the cultural belief system in bringing the immune system into the picture as well, and connecting how, emotions were so involved with shame or fear and joy and gratitude, that put it in a different perspective, I think, that brought a lot of power to it, I think in a good way, to help people. On the one hand, a lot of people who deal with a lot of women in particular who deal with certain diagnosed conditions typically have some deep-seated emotional, usually shame components involved. And if you can give them here's some reasons as to why this, maybe it's not all your fault, not to take the responsibility away, but when I've explained this to patients, let's talk about this. And then it gives them great incentive to go and heal these traumas and these emotional wounds that they've let, that have become stuck in them because they were children, right? For the most part, or whatever, and didn't know what else to do. And it's made me and people I teach and try to spread the message much more mindful of actual, the power of words and the power of what I'm saying and controlling my own emotional state, because of what that's doing, not only to myself, but how that is impacting other people and their health directly. When you see shame is inflammatory, when you understand that, you really think twice about how you might talk to anyone, especially your children.
Children, and especially doctors and people in power. So I'm the proponent of cultural psychoneuroimmunology, because psychoneuroimmunology is very good, but it didn't include culture. And culture is extremely important in the process. So everybody understands that the mind and the body communicate with each other, but where? And this is what I'm bringing it communicates in a cultural context. And culture is anything that's important to survival and meaning, aesthetics, ethics, wellness, all those things. But the way to look at it is that you have a world out there that has infinite possibilities of being interpreted. Culture is the weaving of a fabric around the world, and what you see is the fabric, not the world. It's a fabric cultural process that's created like a fishbowl, and you see that. So, for example, if you are in the Western world, you understand that you have pathogens, and if you get an infection, you're going to need an antibody and an
Biotic.
an antibiotic.
Yeah.
Just blocked it. An antibiotic. So, and a reductionist would say, well, look, the antibiotic is an antibiotic here and there. No, it's not. You take an antibiotic here for some bacterial infection, okay, and it'll take care of it if it's the right antibiotic. But if you're in the Amazons and the shaman says to you, in that wound, a spirit went in, and unless we exercise that spirit, it's not going to heal. No amount of antibiotics are going to do anything for the infection, because the stress will suppress the immune system, and it won't help the antibiotics create because the antibiotics don't do the fixing. The antibiotics just help the immune system and give it a break so it can work. So it's very cultural. And the culture starts when you're born, the day you're born, even before. You have epigenetic transfer. If you're the great-grandchild of someone who was in a concentration camp, you could actually inherit the cortisol level that these people had during the time when they were in a concentration camp. Epigenetic transfer, not DNA, but epigenetic, in the sense that you're transferring things that you learn in the environment at the moment, but you can transfer to the next generation. So for parents, that's a really important component to be aware of.
Yeah. And I think, for some people like to, and it's for parents, let me say, because I'm one, and there's mom guilt is real. And I have to balance that with myself, with my patients, to say, okay, this is real. Things are passed on. I pass things on, the memories of all kinds of things. And don't blame and shame yourself though either, right? I think I want them to use it as a piece of empowering information. One, let your mother off the hook, let your grandmother off the hook. Like some of these, they're just coming from you. This is like a tendency, and you can take charge now with awareness, and epigenetically you can heal it, right? For yourself and your children.
People need to see not so much the blaming, but the complexity of what we are. Mm-hmm. How important, how wonderful things that we pass on. So if you have something that you learned from your grandmother, you learned it by watching her, but also you learned it epigenetically, well, that's powerful. That means that any epigenetics can be reversed, by the way. And you can find biological age with epigenetics, and chronological age. There's nothing you can do about chronological age, but you can reverse biological age. And what matters is your biological age, not your chronological. If you're 50 and your biological age is 30, you're 30. That's how your cells are aging and developing, as you know. So that's all good news. And so rather than putting blame, put responsibility on the power that you have to make changes.
Yeah. So in your, like, say in your courses, and that's one you're doing right now, or do you go over how to reverse yourself biologically? Is that a thing you like to focus on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you give us an example of something so the listeners okay, well, how do I do that? How do I go from 50 to 30?
And this is the latest in your program that I'll be telling you about. The 4 factors that I found of centenarians, and I'll mention them, but just one of them is how they perceive time. It's very important. You can go, and we're doing this in Poland, actually at a longevity center. They do biological markers, both genetic and epigenetics. And then we have that test that I developed where you can see where you are in the factors. And then we correlate that with the biological markers. And then we have interventions that we do to reverse your biological age. And we've been doing that. People in the center have been able to bring their biological age back 9 years. And it's not supplement, it's not meditation, it's a way of looking at the world, but not intellectual. It's an experiential way of changing what we call in neuroscience the default mode, the goggles that you use to look at the world. That's what we change, not behavior, terrains. So an example would be, one of the factors is time, how they perceive time, centenaries. The way that they perceive time is they believe that they have all the time in the world. I asked a centenarian who was 101 about his vegetable garden. I said, how's your vegetable garden? He said, oh, it's really pretty good, but wait till you see it in 3 years. He's 101. Right. So biologically, the brain creates time-space projection, and it makes it easier for you to follow that, but also it reduces your fear of dying or your fear of not having enough time. So that's one component. So we find that when that factor is low, that means that you're not doing centenarian consciousness in time, there's a tendency to have high cortisol and blood pressure problems, or gastritis or reflux or things like that have to do with living in the urgent present. We can change that with methods that we use to teach people how to do it. And then as they do that, you can check later and you find that the cortisol goes down, the blood pressure goes down, and all these problems go down because what you're doing is you're not feeding the propensity for illness. Like family propensity for illness, that's only a propensity, it's not a genetic certainty.
Mhm.
And we can reverse that. But you have to know how to do it, and know epigenetics is a wonderful epigenetics, and the functional MRI are wonderful ways to really be able to prove what we thought before was available and was possible, as you know, in your profession and all that. So there are a lot of good things that are going on in good science now. But in what we do, we're looking at the causes of health and how longevity is learned culturally, and the causes of health are inherited. But that needs to be worked out.
Hmm.
So that's
So
an example.
yeah, in this Poland study that you're doing, what are the markers that you're using to biological age? You say, okay, this is what we actually are biologically. What are some of the markers you're using?
Well, what they're using, of course, they're looking at blood work, and they're looking, for example, your EKG. How does your EKG look compared to somebody who's 50? That kind of thing.
Okay.
But then epigenetically, they specifically look at one of the antibodies, IgM, and that antibody. They look at how that antibody is responding to the or how the epigenetics of your body is responding to, for example, how your eyes age, how your liver ages. So then they put all of that together and they say, overall, you're aging at this age compared to other people who are. So methylation is what they do. Methyl is a chemical that's in the chromosomes. And then there's some parts of the chromosomes where they're called islands, CPG islands. But the point is that whether that methyl goes in or not can cap or release causes of health or causes of illness. So that's how they can tell. And it's very accurate. Very accurate. By the way, when I went there, they said, "Okay, you've been doing all this kind of work. Let's take a look at yours." So they did all kinds of blood work and everything. So the medical director comes over and he says, "You're going to be a centenarian. You're 21 years younger than your chronological age."
Awesome.
Okay, so it's working.
Yeah, you got me already thinking. You got me a little bit worried. I like the time. That time piece. It's so important. I think it's been shifted so much in the last 3 years with the Corona stuff, right?
Yeah.
We had an interview earlier about some of
Sure.
what the emotions were doing to damage people's immune systems. And I'm looking at the consequences in my patients now, and myself and my friends and my family. And it's interesting with this time thing that I can see for many of us, this has accelerated our aging dramatically, because there's a strong trend in people of thinking, I don't know if I'm gonna be here tomorrow. I mean, I don't know the way the world, I don't know if the world's gonna end in 6 months. I mean, we might all be dead. I mean, there's a lot of, I don't know if we're even gonna be alive. And I mean, it's a very interesting energy that even I have found myself in, not maybe necessarily feeling like you're making me like, oh, I have to shift this. Like, I'm already like, I'm really curious what this is, because I can't think this way. I can't think, well, I don't know if I'm gonna be here next year.
But look, as you know now from what we talked about, words have meaning, just like a pathogen. Word is like some kind of bacteria out there. So your brain doesn't know the difference. Your cognition knows, but your brain doesn't know. So you say, I don't know if I'm going to be here tomorrow. It begins to create the types of stress and protections against not being here tomorrow, which works against being here tomorrow. Look at the language. How are you doing? Well, I guess I'm doing okay for my age. Or are we going to be, is the world going to end? That's living in the urgent present. That's totally against the factor of the age consciousness of centenarians. What they'll say things like, oh, I'm having a senior moment. Well, and another thing that we do is we look at how you learned how to age, and we do some techniques. So for example, you go back and you ask yourself, how did I learn to age? Well, this is how you learn to age. You can go back and see under some contemplative state, so it's not hypnosis, just a contemplative state. My grandmother was about 70. How did she look and how did she act? Maybe she was walking with a cane. Well, that's an aging learning that your biology will store it. It will say, when you turn 70, this is what's going to have to happen to you, because 70. There was a study that looked at kids in the 5th and 6th grade, and they said, how does a 50-year-old look and work and walk? They went, with a cane, a 50-year-old. So what do you think that's going to happen to that kid when they're 50?
Yeah.
They're training their mind body space time projection into 50 is a marker that this is how you have to look. And I'm not exaggerating. This is really powerful stuff. And we're constantly saying these things in the language. So I have a friend who's a physician. He's it's about 80 now. And he went to another doctor because his right knee was hurting. So he said, look, my knee's hurting. He said, what do you want? You're 80. I want the same thing that my left knee has, which is also 80, and it's not hurting.
Right.
So that's a kind of mentality. And a lot of doctors, unfortunately, will say, what do you want for your age?
Right.
What do you want for your age? Health.
Right.
Aging is unfortunately, and you know this very well in your profession, gerontology studies the pathology of aging. We study the causes of health in the process of growing older. Growing older, nothing you can do. Aging, a lot you can do. Growing older is a passing of time. Aging is what you do with time based on what your culture taught you about aging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's some wear and tear, but very minimal.
Yeah. Well, one of the cultural contexts that I have learned, which is when you talked about time, I'm really fascinated by the time thing, as you can see. Like, so my kind of spiritual teaching and the stuff that I'm into, and something I've taught all my patients, and it's about really, you know, good old follow your bliss kind of moment. And I say, here's the thing. When time actually stands still, you know, when you're in that space where what we can call it flow state, we can call it you found your bliss. I don't care. But, you know, you look up and it's actually been 5 hours, but you feel like it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I said, you only actually aged 5 or 10 minutes, you guys. That's how I perceive, that's how I've been taught from my spiritual teachers in terms of how the dimensional states work. They go, it is time perception. If you felt like this is so miserable and 10 minutes felt like 2 hours, you aged 2 hours. If time flew by because you were in joy, bliss, flow state, whatever, you actually didn't age. So it's been a thing I've been taught from that dimensional kind of esoteric state that I've chosen to believe. You know, I don't have evidence of it, but I'm like, you know what, that sounds great to me. So it gives me deep purpose to follow my bliss, to chase the butterflies, to find the joy, because I'm like, why would I do anything I can't stand doing? Because it's just going to age me. So I set my life up to only do what I want to do to the best of my ability in that moment. And it kind of goes into what you were just saying, like, oh yeah, I forgot about that whole, but just knowing it's straight up perception. So what I want to know for the listener, you're saying, if somebody is saying those things right now, like, well, you know, for my age, and well, you know, I'm just lucky to be alive, I guess. I mean, who knows, I'll be here tomorrow. Like, I'm really not feeling confident about the world, and because it's a scary time for a lot of people. You're saying they can have exercises and coaching or do things to help shift that in a way so they can change the way they're self-speaking or thinking about time.
Yes, and I'll give you some practical ideas so you can see what I try to take science and make it simple. There are two things in psychology that are really important that we can bring in. One is called affordances, what the environment will afford you to perceive. And the other one is attribution, what cost you give to it. So a little experiment will tell you. One experiment, they had people coming into a room and they told them, we're going to give you a pill, which is a placebo, just a inert. And with this pill, we're going to see how anxious you get. So they're preparing the attribution. The affordance, it's a room very well lit, metal chairs, metal couches, a nurse with a syringe dressed in white, and they said, don't worry, if you pass out, we'll give you a shot and we'll bring you right back up. Okay. So they measured blood pressure and cortisol and all those things. Everything went up. Everything went up. Next room, same pill. Said, look, we're going to give you this pill to see how fast you can relax. If you fall asleep, low lighting, comfortable chairs. If you fall asleep and wake up whenever you want to. Everybody's blood pressure went down, or a large percentage. Cortisol down, everything down, inflammation down, only because of the affordance and the attribution that you give. And we do that constantly because our internal world also has affordances and attributions. So now that you know that, or your audience, I don't know if I'm going to be around for the next year or so. Well, that is an affordance that's saying, what do I do with 1 year? And the attribution is, I have to do it because I'm going to be here for 1 year. Your biology will follow. So time is extremely important in the way that it's perceived. Time doesn't change, it's the perception of time.
That's so, that's a really good nugget for people listening. And it's such a simple thing, but it's like, I don't think a thing that people think about, right? That's a very simple thing to say, yeah, I have a lot of patients that'll come to me, and a primary thing, they're the parents of autistic children. And one of their primary things is, I have got to be healthy because I have to live as long as possible because he's always going to need me. And I don't know what's going to happen when I die.
Yeah, that's not a good reason.
Right. So that this is what they're thinking. Like,
Yeah.
Oh no. Right. So on the one hand, it helps get them in to like care about themselves because it all comes down to what this reason is. But it gives me a really great place to reframe the time conversation for them. It's a beautiful nugget for me clinically. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So
look at it this way. For example, that's a great thing that you bring up here. You can teach the system to survive or to thrive. So what that person is teaching is, I can only be around when I'm of service as a caretaker. Yeah. What happens when I'm no longer of service as a caretaker? This is what happens when people who retire and die within 4 years or get sick within the first year, because now I can go do whatever I want, and now I don't have to worry about anything, and they give up the meaning of their life, the service of their life, and all the things that Aristotle talked about 2,300 years ago, and now we can prove it immunologically, what he was talking about. So it's very important. The people will say, okay, I'll put up with this until I retire. Then when I retire, I can do whatever I want. You're teaching yourself non-joy behaviors. When you get to the point where you retire, you're an expert at non-joy, and bringing joy becomes stressful.
Right. I've seen that so many times with like, I have a lot of patients that they're coming to me in grief and they're angry. My dad worked, and then within 3 months, and after he retired, he was dead. And they have a really hard time and I watch them repeating the same behaviors where they're like kind of addicted to their work. They're miserable. Everything's waiting for the weekend or the vacation, and trying to teach them like the same.
Not in the present. They're not present centered.
Yeah.
They're what I call presenteeism, because I do a lot of work with Fortune 100 executives, and I get them out of presenteeism, which is that they're only present in body. They're thinking about when they get home or their vacation, and they're not in the present. And we were made to be in the present. But look at this beautiful studies. These are very recent studies that have been done. Aristotle said that the hedonic life is not enough, that the life of pleasure for the sake of pleasure is not enough. And he talked about what he called eudaimonic life. Daimon, not demon. Eudaimonic, which eu means good in Greek, and daimon means spirit, so good spirit. He said it's more important to have meaning, service, joy, purpose. Those are really important. So, okay, that's fine. Now, some research have been looking at a very specific immunological response called CTRA. I always forget how the acronym, but it's a conserve transcriptional response to adversity. And what it does is that these are about 21 to 40 genes in immune cells that are anti-inflammatory, antibody, and antiviral. So response to adversity. They tested people who are hedonic, just hedonic, and they tested people who are eudaimonic. People that are eudaimonic have better CTRA than the others, even though both felt the same amount of pleasure. The immune system can tell the difference between them. So Aristotle was probably the first immunologist 2,300 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. It might be one of the reasons why I think that's interesting you say that, like experiencing pleasure, right? Same amount of pleasure. Some people age, some people kind of don't. Maybe why some certain people can seem to get away with things. We're like, why can they seem to like do all that and they're not sick and old from it? And these people did the same thing. Like, what is the magic formula here? You know,
and it's not genetics.
Right.
Not genetics at all. But the thing about it is that you got to be careful. I don't mean you, but I mean the audience. You have to be careful in not becoming a caretaker. The caretaker is not good. Service has to be service with pleasure and inclusive with you. So let me give you an example how to create that, how to create the eudaimonic life. I love to go to this Persian restaurant every Saturday, and I go there. That's hedonic and beautiful, great. So then I thought, well, I never thought about recycling. I thought, it's just recycling. But then I found that there's an island. I hope Bill Gates is listening and maybe do something about it. It's not an island, but it's the size of Texas, from LA to Hawaii, of plastic, the size of Texas plastic on the ocean.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one way to do eudaimonia. But anyway, so I thought, okay, now I think that the recycling is really important. Now I'm going to do my part. So I got 4 or 5 bags, one for plastic, one for this. So before I go to my Persian restaurant on Saturdays, I do my eudaimonia. I go there, service, and I take my plastic and I recycle, but I don't do it. I got to leave so I can get there. I really get into the experience, the people that are there, the good that I'm doing. That's how it works. Once I'm done, then, all right, I go to the other one. So you have eudaimonia and you have hedonic. Tremendous immunological power. That simple thing.
Yeah, very, very simple thing. Something that, you're doing with service, not out as a punishment or out of guilt, but that really with some thoughtfulness and intention behind it, that it can be very, very simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has to be pleasurable. For example, if you say, okay, I'm going to do service. All right, I'm going to volunteer to serve food if you like that, that's fine. But I would hate to do that. I'm real clumsy about those things. So I wouldn't like to do that. So service has to be service with pleasure, and not service that abuses the individual. That's actually, caretakers don't have very good health.
Yeah.
Because they don't know body cues or when they need something.
Yeah. It's tough. I deal with a lot of special needs children, and I deal with obviously their parents. And I don't know that magic wand formula to how to help mothers of special needs children who have high needs, and how she can protect herself. And, she is the caretaker, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Now, typically that does come with a lot of love and joy and service. And I can see the ones that find that, and then the ones that don't. And it is drastically different.
And I think the indicator there, I'm glad you brought that up, because, for example, asthma is caused by controlling mothers and cockroaches and the genetic predisposition. So there are people who have kids with special needs, and that's understandable. But sometimes they tend to be over controlling and martyr-like, in that they're the only ones that can do it. They don't look for resources very well. Yeah. Some do. And I think that's the difference. The one that looks for resources and don't deal with things out of guilt, those are the ones who do well. The others don't really do really well. One of the ways that I've worked with a lot of parents who have kids who have asthma is to teach them to be more self-caring and less controlling, less choking the child. And it helps the parent, and it helps the child with the asthma.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. And you guys, he was really right. Cockroaches are a real big problem with asthma. Like, that's a major thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, that's why the numbers are going up in urban situations. And it's when I found that out, I was like, that's so gross. And I'm really freaked out by that. Like, cause I really don't like cockroaches, Mario.
Yeah.
I can tell you, I got a problem with them a little bit. I've done
prehistoric, quite surviving.
Yeah. I've done a lot of neurofeedback to help me with my issues with those. Okay. A lot of deep states. I'm like, I really got a cockroach problem. I do.
So did my mother.
Right.
My mother would say, I'm afraid of nothing except cockroaches.
Oh my God, maybe she and I are kindred spirits, because
she lived to be 97, so that's pretty good.
Okay, good. Like, I try to tell people, my people live real long. So I want to get back to something cultural. And you talked about this when you say this, the cultural lens. So ultimately, I mean, there's like millions of cultures. I mean, I know we have we have the human culture, and we have each country, then it just can keep going smaller and smaller and smaller based on, are you Muslim living in New York, or are you Muslim living in Bangladesh, or like it gets down to that specific,
yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You can, and that's a great question. You can break it down this way. We have cultural learning of survival and cultural learning of meaning. So whether you're in New York, a Muslim or Catholic or whatever, the cultural survival you're going to learn is the immediate family for the first few years. That's what you're going to learn, cultural survival. Then as you get together with Muslims and you get together, then you get a conglomerate of meaning, but that meaning is always related to the survival too. So there's an interconnectedness. But we're complex enough that we can handle many, many cultures and come with some kind of universal to understand what our moral compass is or lack of it. But basically, you have to break it down into the survival cultural lessons and meaning cultural lessons. And then you begin to see that the complexity can actually be worked out.
Okay. Have you figured out, like in all your works, I know you deal with a lot of cultures. I know, centenarians and longevity is kind of your shtick there. Have you figured out which cultures are the cultural context? Like, oh, these people they've got a really, like, we should move there. Like, you know what I mean? Like, where are your top 5 cultures of like, oh, this is what you want to think like and be like?
All right. Well, I have some good news. My father was from Spain, and now Spain is number 1 in longevity. It beat Japan.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
And one of the things that they're doing, and immediately I go, okay, so what's going on in Spain? Is that they're coming back to the ways of doing things. 18% to 20% of the people still do siestas.
Yeah.
They have what they call sobremesa, which talking after dinner. Also, the men, very chauvinistic, they say that part of it is because the men are the best lovers. So, they are. But there are things, the Mediterranean diet, there are many, many things that actually add to that. And they have this concept of, they were getting very Germanic, actually, being very punctual, which is good and everything. But they got too Germanic and they started losing that longevity. Now they're going back into being more Spanish.
Yeah.
That if you're late 5 minutes, you don't have a heart attack and that kind of thing. Again, the time consciousness.
Yeah.
And
I
so
went to Spain decades ago. Nobody's on time for anything. Like, as an American, I was over there like, what's happening? Why are there no actual store hours? They're just going to open when they're going to open. They're all taking a nap. It was the weirdest thing as an American. And then you kind of roll into it eventually, you're like,
it slows down your nervous system.
You do. The same thing happened in Costa Rica. I was like all irritated at first, and then it took about 7 days. And then I went, oh,
yeah,
this pace is so different, because they're like, I'll see you later. And to me, see you later as an American, I thought that I'm going to see you for dinner, right? It's like 3 days later to them, though.
No,
like,
that's
what?
right.
I told you later. What are you talking about?
You see the time issue there, the time conscious.
Totally different.
So the best way to look at it with cultures, because there's not one culture that has everything. Spain's pretty good, and so is Japan. But is to look at the causes of health that they live. One of the causes of health is creativity. The other one is the infinite time, admiration without envy, breaking bread with people that you love, righteous anger. All those things are really important.
Where's America with this? Like, I mean,
Well, look,
we're lacking on a lot of this.
Supposedly the best medical system in the world, the best is 16th in the world.
Right.
So it's not that good. Yeah. Medicine is wonderful, but that's not the key.
We don't eat together. Families we don't eat together. Our outlook, for some of these things are not good. And I don't
watching television, drinking Diet Cokes to think that you're gonna, or diet drinks. I see people obese. They go to a restaurant, they order all kinds of things. I'll have a diet drink. So that takes care of it. Yeah. And diet drinks actually toxify the liver and make you hungrier. Any diet drink.
Right. So I love these little biological nuggets you can drop, because what you're able to do is studying longevity so long. All right, so we have Spain, Japan. Any other nugget out there of like a country that maybe people wouldn't think about? Like, oh.
Well, Costa Rica is one of the blue zones. Costa Rica, Ikaria in Greece, Loma Linda in the United States, Okinawa, of course. But the United States, we already have about 100,000 centenarians, and it's the fastest growing segment of the population. So, there's some in Cuba, not because of the revolution, but before the revolution. I've been there to look at some centenarians, and they're all over. But those are the 5 blue zones where you have the most. Yeah.
Interesting. And so they're already in the 100, right? They're there. Yeah. And are you seeing any culture that's having a big, like you just like change, like Spain's going back to kind of remembering who they are, right? Instead of like
being
forced. So they're having a shift. Anybody else having like a shift towards like it's getting better, or like, wow, this country's really going downhill because they're forgetting who they are? Has there been any
Costa Rica, yeah, Costa Rica, and of course Okinawa. The United States is not getting better. It's kind of keeping up, but it's not getting better, and it's getting worse.
There's a couple places that you never talk about, and I don't know if it's because you didn't get there. And there's a couple tribes up in Siberia, and these people live to be really old. The Yakutians and Altampians or whatever. I always say it wrong, and I don't hear you ever talk about them. I don't know, is it because Russia's hard to get to, or
it's hard to get to, but also I've done some work with what they call the horsemen of the Caucasus in the part of Georgia and that area. They eat a lot of dairy foods. Many have clogged arteries without any symptoms, because they have a lot of compensatory kinds of things. I'm not suggesting that, but those are the realities that they have. So yeah, there are quite a few in that area too, and they have a totally different diet, not the best that you would imagine, but yet they have a way of compensating. It's kind of like a biological override. Yeah.
Again, I think it's context. It's not just what you eat. It's not just like how it all works together, right?
That's
you can have the most perfect diet, and the way you're thinking about it, you just don't have joy. You don't you're living in being shamed all the time, right? Causing inflammation, whatever. You can override what you're eating. People,
yes,
food is everything it's cracked up to be, as everybody wants to think sometimes. But
context can affect the amount of insulin that you need, the amount of pain medication that you need. Context alone, just because, and Ellen Langer has done this work, and I've done some work also with pain. If you are diabetic type 1, when you're insulin dependent, you have to, and if you measure the context, so you look at the context and when you need the insulin and how much you need, you're going to see a variation with the context. Mm-hmm. So the context is powerful, like the affordance and the attribution that we talked about.
Mm-hmm. So the affordance and attribution, when I hear you talk about that in that way, I think of, I know it's different just in the psychedelic world because it's becoming huge, set and setting, right? You know, so everybody, if you're going to use ketamine or ayahuasca in a psychiatric health, because it's really big right now. And a lot of these things are being talked about in longevity, like psilocybin and stuff like that. And set and setting is what I think of. Is it the same, different words meaning the same thing?
Well, what happens with all those, I've worked with ayahuasca and psilocybin, and what these things do, I do a course on the neuropsychology of ayahuasca, so you can understand. Ayahuasca, what it does, and all these, what they do, is the part of the brain that has to do, and it's just not one part, but the conglomerate of the neuromaps of selfing, those kinds of chemicals unself you. And they allow you to go in something that would be the closest thing, a mystical experience. Yeah. So you lose some of that image of self. And when you come back, many people have improvements in PTSD, anxiety. They don't worry so much about death. Tibetans can do the same thing with lucid dreamings without any of the drugs, but that's what they do. They basically open up some things for you. And you don't want to do it on a regular basis, because especially if you have psychotic kinds of tendency, it's very dangerous. Yeah. And it has to be, there's a place in Costa Rica that does it under medical supervision and shamans. And so, yeah, it's something that you could explore, but it has to do with professionals. So not,
it's becoming very, very popular. I'm a fan, but I'm reserved. And I have to tell people, like, you know, it's tough when you take a person out of a cultural context and put them in something that they didn't prepare for, didn't understand, have a very different understanding as Americans at times. So it doesn't mean we can't use, like, doesn't mean I can't do a Native American sweat lodge, right? Doesn't mean I can't benefit, but like, you know, set and setting and having a build up and understanding and training for something is a little bit different. But yeah, so you're kind of saying the benefit with that would be like the neurotransmitter, like you're losing that sense of self and like coming back. I've had ayahuasca.
Serotonin changes.
So you can lose some of the negative scripts, basically, like the self-identity that were an illusion, that you're like, that's not who I am.
And have a new space. But what's happening is that all of these things come, again, ritual is one of the most powerful causes of health. All of these things come, Native Americans and all, they did ayahuasca. They did it in the Amazon for many thousands, but it was a spiritual ceremony.
Yeah.
It wasn't to get high and have a wonderful weekend.
Right.
And unfortunately, some people go there because that's what they want. And that's not going to do them any good or very little good, because it has to be an integrated process of ritual, and not to abuse it and not use it as another prop like you would use cocaine or like you could use anything else like that.
Yeah. Or they would think like one weekend is going to heal 30 years of trauma or bad choices.
It just opens up.
And yeah. So I see that a lot with people. I think I have to be like, you're not quite ready. You need to stay, you're not stable actually. And this could make dissociation and psychosis a lot worse. So
when I work with them, actually, I teach them ways to deal with when they go back to their own environment. There's a shock, how to deal with the shock, but also I teach them about the archetypal wounds that you know about in my books, if they have archetypal wounds, because they have some monstrous kinds of things. They see snakes and things. So I teach them ways to deal with that based on the archetypal wound that they have. So if they have abandonment, betrayal, or shame, the monstrous and bizarre things that come are related to the wound. So teach them how to navigate in that space, so they don't have the traumatic experiences some people have. Some people vomit and diarrhea and all kinds of things. But I did it, and I had done so much Tibetan Buddhist work that the shaman came over and said, you didn't have any reaction. What happens? And no, just, it's just, I know what I'm doing. It's just navigate it, and that's it. He was very upset because he wanted me to vomit and do all these other things that everybody does. So
funny. Yeah, it's funny because I find most men that I know, like it's kind of easy journeys. And I knew ahead of time, I was like, it's all your mindset. You just set it up like so I had a very easy, enjoyable, because I'm like, oh, that's like, there's no snakes. We're not doing that. No, maybe we're clear. I'm going to focus. I focused on what I wanted. Like, I want enjoyable. Yeah. So I was like, mother taught me, let's make it easy for you. And she held me very gently, which was lovely.
It's wonderful. You're right. It's a mindset. What I tell myself when I did it, the mantra was, here, you're not a teacher, you're a student. And anytime that anything came up, here, you're not a teacher, you're a student. So what does it do neuropsychologically? It opens you up for novelty learning, not for fear.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Mario, let me ask you, like, you've got a lot of books. So somebody's listening and they haven't read anything. What's your favorite? What would be think, oh, reading this one? This is actually this is the best one I wrote. If you're going to read one book of mine, which one would you say for most people to do?
I have 2 bestsellers and a novel. The most fun was a novel, The Man from Autumn. Yeah. Because that actually teaches you how to live biocognition. The Mind Body Code is a great book. It's been a bestseller. Yeah. The Mind Body Self. The most fun was the Man from Autumn, but all 3 are good. You can start with The Man from, not you, but you've.
I haven't read the novel, so and I don't know what I don't know, because here's the thing, and this is really good. People like me, right? Overachieving, whatever. I don't allow myself to read novels because I think of it as a waste of time, and I have to be helping people and learning and blah blah blah. And even though I know it's not, it actually is still good for my brain. Like, I'm so left brain at times that I have to justify pleasure.
Sure. And it serves you well, but then you take it too far. But there in that novel, you're going to learn indirectly about the guardians of the heart, relationships. What is the psychoneuroimmunology of stigmata, people that have stigmata?
I know you studied. I didn't know you wrote about it in that novel.
Yeah.
You studied this. It's just
because one of the characters is kind of autobiographical. He investigates stigmata for the Vatican and the Catholic Church. So it's basically what I've been doing. Yeah. So it's a lot of fun, and there's some great food and wines that I talk about.
Really? Okay, I'm gonna order it when we're done.
So
I'm gonna read it. Yeah.
I had some people write me and say, "Oh, I love the book, but how much do you weigh?" Because it's all food and wine. But it's living the life of joy, and these people have had things that have happened in their lives. And the publishers that rejected it told me it's really nice and everything, but it doesn't have enough sex and enough violence. I said, well, that's the point. It doesn't have to have that.
I love it. And is it appropriate for like teens?
Oh yeah, especially for teens is really good because you're learning what life is about with good science, the science of joy and hope, not just
Okay, I had no idea it was about that. And as we started, I told you after like this book, I'm learning more and more.
It's a
I've had
great
my
book.
own personal, like I've had problems with joy. It's my middle name, Mario. So my name is Stephanie Joy Rimka. And since I was a little girl, I didn't like that. I thought it was weak and soft.
Yeah.
And I hid that it was joy, and I just let the J be there.
Look how interesting.
I thought it sounded very masculine, like a doctor, Stephanie J. Rimka, right?
Yeah.
I thought it made me sound professional.
And then you became a doctor to show them.
Exactly. I want to prove it to you. And I'm discovering more and more. And I really think becoming a mother is the thing that opened me up to so much of my feminine, and more embracing that and being okay with it, not having to be so hard and not having to, I just became so melted soft with my son. And I've realized at times, he's 16 now. So my role is changing. Our relationship is changing. It's different. I've got to let him go more, and he's going to be a man. He's not my little baby. And I know that, and it's still hard. I still miss a lot of those softer little moments. Like now I have to ask, can I touch your face? Can I get a hug?
Yeah.
I have to ask permission. He's 16, we're going through that.
Like you would do with an adult.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, are you cool with that? And I used to just own you basically. Now I'm like, oh yeah, I don't. And at times there was a thing I said, that I thought, God, it sounds kind of pathetic, but the happiest time in my life is when I stayed home with him for the first 6 years. Like when I didn't work and I was just full-time mom, it was the happiest. But I actually changed that now. I understand it wasn't the happiest, it was the most joyful. Yeah. Because of what joy really is. Now that I'm understanding that joy is its own special supra emotion, and it's like stacked on top of things. And you can be tired and grieving and angry, and you can still be joyful at the same time. And that face-to-face connection neurologically and the relatedness I get from that, amazing little creature, I'm like, oh, it's not that. I've misunderstood this. It's joy. And I've gotten the most joy there. And I haven't been building joy in enough areas of my life, actually. And that's at a great cost to who I am and my longevity and my health and everything else. So I'm on this journey to find joy and understand joy better. And tell them a little bit about joy, because it's a very unique emotion. Yes, I think, talk about that a little bit.
There are about 7 or 9 emotions that you can identify worldwide. Joy and love are not one. They're complex. They're a family of emotions and cognitions. So you can identify laughter, fear, startledness, surprise, not joy or love. If you see somebody like this and you think, oh, they're in love, they could be thinking about ice cream. You can't tell. Yeah. But they're so complex.
Yeah.
The thing about it is that we have to learn it. And we have to learn who was the killjoy, who were the killjoys in our lives, who were the people that couldn't handle joy for a period of time. And those are the people that actually taught you that joy, if you get it, it's not sustainable because they look at it externally. Joy and happiness are totally different. Happiness is an external event. Joy is an internal terrain of serenity. That's it. But you have to learn who taught you. Like, for example, joy, who taught you that joy is not a good word or not a good name for you? Somebody taught you by observation or what they said or what they did, and you have to go back and clean that up and then bring it back, and you'll see. And people, I'll give you an example. Look, my grandmother taught me that when I was a kid, I would cut grass for my neighbor and he would pay me. She said, no, you never take money from your neighbors, never. So I had a real hard time. Part of me wanted to get paid, so I would complain and all that. So the person was so nice that he put the money in my pocket. So then when I went into private practice, I had a real problem with bringing my fees up. And I had a real problem when things were going really well. Well, I was taught that the ceiling of abundance is kind of limited for me.
Right. And that's very common, actually.
Yeah.
And you were able to put that piece together and then find a way to release it, let it go.
Some of the techniques and some of the things that and you have to live them. You have to practice it to get the neural maps, as you know. But yeah, those are the things we learn, and we learn them. And we have such a great brain that it uses it as a way of survival, but not understanding that it's not survival, it's meaning. So the brain has to be taught.
What's one of the best ways to teach the brain to create joy?
Okay, for example, let's say that joy for you is to feel worthy, because that's the terrain of joy, worthiness. Okay, so you start with, I'm worthy. And then you say to yourself, no, I'm not. Where does that come from? You go into a contemplative state. I'm worthy. No, I'm not. Who taught you that? Well, they didn't tell you you were unworthy, but maybe they weren't there to build. Okay. Mm-hmm. So then you get to a point and say, I'm worthy. Who would support that in my life? And you go back, and maybe even a neighbor. Oh, you're so wonderful. That's part of it. You're beginning to create neural maps. But then, okay, when do I feel that I was worthy? What are my archives, experiential archives that tell me that I was worthy? You bring them back, you embody them, the neural maps get stronger, and then you have to live it for a week or two to create the consciousness of worthiness. Movement allows the behavior to be consolidated.
Yeah.
So you do, I'm going to go to dinner. I'm not worthy. Oh, yes, I am, because I have evidence and I embody that evidence. So I'm going to go out to dinner and enjoy my dinner. But look at how the culture fights that. I went to dinner the other night by myself to celebrate me. And this little old lady, because there's a little old lady kind of mindset, comes to me and she said, are you all right? At a restaurant. I said, oh, yeah, I'm great. Why are you eating by yourself?
Really?
Because I'm celebrating. Yeah. I mean, wow. She was real concerned. What are you celebrating? Being me. And she kind of looked at me and she thought probably I was psychotic or something. And she walked away very concerned about me because I was eating by myself. So our culture teaches us that worthiness or joy comes only when you're with somebody. You go to a restaurant, they say, only one? What, how many do you need? Or can we put you by the bar? No, you can't put me by the bar. I want a table. Yeah. And it's constantly fighting the worthiness of the individual. It's only when somebody gives you something together. I'm so joyful because I'm with this person. You have to be joyful when you're alone and nobody's looking.
Okay.
That's the practice.
Yeah.
And many more, but that's a good start. So affirmations don't work because they're not embodied. You say, I'm a good person, and no, you're not. Look at all the things you've done. But if you say, I'm a good person, and let me go back, when was I a good person? Bring it back. The psychoterminology is all stored there, and you embody it, you feel it in your body, right. And then you live, I'm a good person for a few weeks. And then it becomes, I'm a good person.
So you're kind of going through, I call it sometimes with my clients, like a golden memory. Sometimes I'll have them go through and find something like a memory and that, and then take themselves back to it and they really feel it. They have that embodiment.
Yeah.
Or something that we're working on. So like, that's a really interesting tip. I mean, he just kind of explained the process, you guys, of like how you can do some of this yourself, finding some of the, find an evidence of opposite of this, the negative self-talk story, and feel it for a minute. And sometimes, these things might be from something that happened to you when 6 years old or 12,
yeah,
13,
it doesn't matter.
It can be, and that you can feel that. I can certainly relive a proud moment or a shameful moment very quickly. Sure. And you can be brought to tears of joy or sadness very, very quickly. We all know this, we've been through it. And then you let yourself go do that several times throughout the week, really embody it, basically retrain the nervous system.
Yes. Exactly. And it works.
Kind of muscle memory of joy or worthiness or whatever you're working on. That's because a very simple thing anybody can do, right?
It's very simple and it's extremely complex neuropsychologically and psychoneurologically, but it's simple because what I try to do is, okay, this is very complex, but how can I bring it down and see how we could do it in a simple way? By doing that, all kinds of neuropsychology and neural maps are being created. And then the brain, the code for the brain is repetition. That's it. It doesn't, the code for cognition is meaning. So if you repeat that you're a bad person throughout the day, the brain says, this is really important for survival, that I'm a bad person, so it's good for survival. And then cognition says, how can I prove now in my world that I'm not a good person?
Right.
So it's a vicious cycle. Yeah. And then it goes together and you're not a good person. You got a lot of evidence. The brain is
brilliant at it. Then the reticular activating system will only search for that. It knows exactly what to do. Yeah. It's brilliant. I love that. So I think it's a great place to end. If you guys got a good tip, that's the kind of stuff that's actually in the Mind Body Code. He goes through exercises in there. I have the physical book and the audio book where you read it and you go through the exercises, which is a really cool, I think it's a really cool way. People can pause it, you can do the thing, you can actually hear him, or hear it, and like I'll learn to experience it that way. And then we'll make sure we have in the show notes, say the website again, biocognition.
Biocognitive.com,
Biocognitive.com.
biocognitive.com. And I have a little exploration for you. When you read the Man from Autumn, see who you can identify with most, Sabella or Kate.
Okay.
We'll see.
All right, cool.
You can tell me.
Yeah, so I'm going to make sure I get this out right away. So when you guys are listening, his course will still be going on. So if you want to get there, go to in the description, biocognitive.com, and it's the Shift Network. It's in your course.
Shift Network, and it's called the 4 factors of healthy longevity.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Martinez.
Stephanie, so it's a pleasure to see you, and
you
wonderful.
Too.
You're doing something right because
brilliance.
You're not aging, so you're doing something right.
I'm trying, but I'm definitely, you taught me a lot, and I saw a great hiccup with the way I've been thinking of things with timing.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I'm going to work on shifting. I thought I was doing a good thing by it's getting me more in the present and,
yes,
gratitude. However, actually I've been thinking, well, I don't know, I really probably gonna, you know what I mean? Like, it's actually, I'm like, oh no, I need to improve it a little bit. And I want to stay young looking. I'm not, no joke. So
you're doing a great job.
So yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Good to see you again.
You too.
Enjoy. Bye-bye.